All right, happy Friday, everyone. And we are back with another episode of Learning Tech Talks, where we're exploring the landscape of learning technology while cutting through the fluff to help you go digital, do digital learning right. So today I'm joined by Wendy Hamilton. She's the Chief Executive Officer over at TechSmith, and they have a portfolio of products that I think most everyone who would be watching this should be very familiar with. And if you're not already, you will be by the time we're done here. And so we're talking about visual communication, simplifying that, but also really the role we play in learning and development and as instructional designers when it comes to technology. So if you're joining us live, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, share the post, tag in somebody who'd benefit from the conversation. And while you're at it, comment and tell us where you're joining from. Let us know where you're joining from. So I am joining, as always, from the ever beautiful Waukesha, Wisconsin. Wendy, you are in Lansing, Michigan, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Is it warming up? Is it warming up there yet?
That's my good news is I did not see snow outside this morning. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know it's still cold here. It's going to be cold for a little bit yet, but I think Sunday it's supposed to be in the mid 50s, which, as you know, from the Midwest means board shorts, flip flops, and time to go tanning out in the yard. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
All right. So before we get going on the topic of TechSmith and all that good stuff, the question of the week, and those of you watching, I want your answers too, but this is a little bit of a unique one. So you've had some time to prepare. If you had a time machine, okay, if you had a time machine, but it could only go one way, backwards or forwards in time, which way would you go and why?
Oh, I don't even hesitate for that answer.
Okay.
I definitely go future. I've already seen the past. I'm a tech junkie. I want to see what happens with self-driving cars and home automation and, all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit scary to go forward. Like, are we still going to be at home with no social contact? Is AI taking over the world?
It's 2030 and we're still home. That'd be a little unnerving.
Yeah, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think the risk of finding out what went wrong is we're seeing how technology progressed.
Okay, interesting. So for me, I had the home court advantage, so I had some time to prepare longer than you did. I struggled with this one because I was like, I don't even know if I'd want to get in a time machine, but I actually would probably choose going back, and not because I'd want to less necessarily see things that I already knew about, but to experience some of the history, like way in the back, and actually see what it was like firsthand. To me, would be fascinating. My concern with going into the future would be if I already knew where we were going to go, it would be less exciting for me to experience it firsthand. And I'm afraid I would be too busy trying to figure it out then when I came back to be like, okay, now how do I actually get ahead of that? So, but again, I think I spent way too much time thinking about it. It's supposed to just be an icebreaker question. I turned it into something different. So no, that's awesome. That is awesome. All right. So as we get into it, TechSmith, we talked about this a little before we went live. You've been the CEO for 4 years, but TechSmith has been around for a lot longer than that and was started by your dad. So with that one, tell me a little bit, tell everybody, because again, I think a lot of people are familiar with the company and the products, but what was kind of the story of TechSmith? How did it get its start and how did it get to where it is today?
Sure. Well, it's been around actually quite a while. It was founded in 1987, so 33 years. In February was our anniversary. My father, learned electrical engineering when he served in the Army, which was basically made him a computer genius back then. Although I think he was a sociology major. And he worked for the Michigan State Department, actually doing large computer statistics work. And then this thing called the PC was invented. And this is back when someone said PC in every office, that'll never happen or whatever. And he, as a hobbyist, got really interested in them and ultimately left his secure job at the state to pursue independently consulting on how to, go in the back door and set up a little PC network for the finance department to run the equivalent of Excel or whatever. That was a big thing to do secretly that the IT people didn't know about or whatever. And he never did it because he was going to make a lot of money or something. He never even thought that would ever happen. He did it because of what he was passionate about. And that consulting business grew. And they actually created Snagit 30 years ago to do documentation themselves on consulting. There wasn't a great way back then to take even a picture of Windows, and they needed to leave how-to information behind for how to connect to your network or do this or that. And they had this asset, and it was also just the beginning of the internet, which is also weird.
Isn't it funny to think that that's like 30 years ago? Some people may not even, this is their normal. They can't even imagine a world without it. 30 years ago, it just didn't exist.
They actually originally shared Snagit as freeware. And then when parts of their consulting business got displaced by just core Windows operating system functionality, they started to convert to a product business. And then they originally made it free for personal use, paid for corporate use. And I'll tell you, I was consulting at a large pharmaceutical company early in my career, and Snagit had gone viral. Like, people just downloaded it from the internet and installed it. And then what would happen is, purchasing agent or IT person would go, "Oh no, we're not allowed to have this. It's illegal to be using without paying." And they would call TechSmith, no sales department, just engineers. They would call TechSmith and say, "I've got 200 seats. What do I owe you?" That's how they became. Yeah.
That's how it became that way.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So Snagit, so TechSmith actually started as a consulting company that then Snagit became part of the portfolio. And then how did it go from, that to just, because now you've got more than just Snagit. So it became really a software company. That's really what you would consider yourself now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Snagit is a general purpose screen capture tool that's largely used to create how-to images or very simple videos explaining a process or, capturing some information. And then Camtasia was the next product, and it was a total natural evolution. And that's a full screen recorder video editor.
Video editing studio, really.
Yeah. And that came out, I'm guessing, I'm not actually sure, 7 years later after Snagit. And those two products are still the bulk of our revenue today, which is unheard of in the software industry too, that a 30-year-old product has stayed relevant. But there's always a new digital media pain point, and we just stay in tune with that and evolve to solve those newest pain points. And then we have an additional offering in lecture capture, which is quite important these days. We have the largest market share for academic lecture capture globally. And that product is Relay, but we're actually rebranding it.
You're rebranding
it. Yeah. We're combining a lot of our cloud products and rebranding them to Nomia eventually.
There's no shortage of changes going on then.
No, you have to evolve. Yeah. If you want.
And that's great. So I can say on this one, because I've used Snagit maybe not 30 years ago. I wasn't using it, but probably late 90s, early 2000s, I was using it, and looking at where Snagit has come from, right? What it was. I remember back when it still was a powerful tool, because to your point, back in the day, there wasn't a good way to even capture your screen, without it being clunky and all this stuff, which I got my start in software, and that was a nightmare, right? The product developers change something, you're like, oh my gosh, like I've got to go back and recapture all this stuff. And that's how I found Snagit was. But where it is today, I don't even know that you would just call it a screen capture tool anymore. It can do that, but the capability is far more robust than simply, snippet from Windows or anything like that.
Yeah. We have we still target very simple uses. We just don't want people to get frustrated or cause confusions trying to explain something to a coworker or customer about how something works, right? What's changed is people have do that even more professionally. They want to be quick but look professional, and that's really where we target. Yeah.
Well, and that's what we talked about a little bit is, before we came on, was the fact that there are tools out there that are more robust, maybe more, can do fancier some of these things. But even myself, sometimes it's like, I don't need to take the Ferrari out of the garage. I'm fine with taking the Chevy because it can do everything I need it to do. And it's much easier. So with that one, right. So that's what Snagit is. Then we've got, then Camtasia came along, and that, was for screen recording. Folks who are watching, I'd love to know how many of you are familiar with this stuff, because that's how I used Camtasia. And actually, Snagit didn't used to have video capabilities, right? That's relatively new, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, and now I can't believe I'm saying that, but back in the day, it was like Snagit was for pictures, Camtasia was for video.
Yeah.
Now Snagit can do both, right?
Yeah. The video application for Snagit is kind of one take videos that you're not going to edit. You're just, I'm capturing this conversation right now and setting it off. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Camtasia is a full nonlinear editor and transitions, and
you got the layers and right. Yeah. There's a ton of stuff, which, we can start talking about some of this stuff in the context of how this is changing the role of the instructional designer. But I know officially it's not official, but there's some changes coming to Camtasia, right? Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, our next major release, Camtasia 2020, is coming in 4 days, the 28th. Yeah.
4 days. All right. Right around the corner. I know I'm excited about it with that one. So for people who are watching, if you're a Camtasia user, there's things right around the corner. So with that, let's talk a little bit about two things. This kind of leads me to go two places. One of the things that I've always found valuable about whether it's TechSmith products or just kind of this concept, and I think this was maybe more what your dad was trying to get at, was when it comes to software, one of the biggest things people need is these resources, right? They don't always need formal training. Like, I don't need an e-learning on how to put in an expense report. I need a resource that just walks me through the steps. And I think that's one of the things that, as instructional designers and learning professionals, and honestly, even non-L&D professionals, because that's not even your only target audience, correct?
Our audience is anybody who needs to create an instructional video, period.
Okay. or just even a image or something like that, a job aid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with that, I'm curious, as you talk to customers, as you talk to people out there, how do people make that journey? Because I think sometimes with L&D, that can be a little bit of a bumpy road, because it goes against kind of the way we've been taught in the academic sense. But software, it seems a little more natural, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
Do most of your consumers use it for software? Or are you seeing people use it in different and creative ways?
There are tons of uses, but we aspire to do two really well. And one is academic lecture capture, general lecture capture.
Okay.
And there, the issue is engagement of the professor. The Ferrari looks nice, but people also might be a little afraid to drive it for the first time, if it's their first time driving. Okay. So how do you make it really easy? And the other is technology training, software training or software documentation. And there, the general issue usually is pace of change. And it is still speeding up that pace of change for software. So instructional designers play a different role in that. They need to design, not create. They can't, you can't script something out and do 4 reviews and, tweak it so that the branding looks really good. By the time you're done with all that, software's changed.
I've been there, right? You're like, oh, wow, you spend all this time getting it perfect. And then they're like, oh, well, we're doing a point release that actually changes the entire UI.
Yeah. Yeah. And the needs are different of the customer. I mean, it's a challenging position to be creating customer education content for a software company. Like marketing wants it to be primarily focused toward net new acquisition, and support wants it to be, prevention of issues, so you don't need to call them. Product management wants it to be get people using these key strategic features. But most customers want, there are fringes, the brand new people and the expert power users, both who need to be served. But the masses, they just want to ask the question when they have it as they're using the software.
Right.
And it isn't necessarily something they think of as training. They just think of it as an answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to this whole, formal learning versus performance support, which is, I mean, and I think sometimes I see this, kind of be almost an argument in our industry, is like, well, performance support is king. No, formal learning is king. It's like, well, there's really not a right answer to that question. It's more, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And in software, a lot of times it's like, it's performance support. I mean, people really truly just need to know, how do I go through this process? And so with this, because the other thing is, we talked a little bit about how, it's about making it easier, which sometimes can feel a little uncomfortable or threatening to, people in the L&D space of, well, do we really want SMEs creating content? Is that a safe space? They aren't formally trained in instructional design. What happens if we give them Snagit and they create a job aid without our approval? I'm curious, I've been part of these conversations where you're like, well, I think we'll live, if Bill in accounting makes a job aid and doesn't have to come to us with a formal training request. But that's part of the mission that you've done with this, right? Is to democratize that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we, again, everybody has knowledge to share. I mean, whether you've sort of solved a problem with the fastest way to put something in your expense report and you want to share it with your coworker, or you're sharing knowledge on YouTube, or you're a professor, and none of those people necessarily have an instructional design background, and they're not going to. But what we see and what we've actually tried to do in this Camtasia 2020 release is to figure out how to improve the working relationship between the instructional designer, who can design the process, design the framework, and how they work with the SME, who has the knowledge, but maybe isn't comfortable even producing videos at all, or it's not really a big part of their job, right? So what we've done in this release of Camtasia is two things. One, we've really focused on this ability for someone like an instructional designer or a team lead, or internally we call them sheriffs, to create.
I love that.
Yeah, to create. To encapsulate everything that they might need, a template with placeholders and presets and libraries, encapsulate that into one file, and then to push that file out to deputies or SMEs. And they literally just have these guardrails, and they can just come into these placeholders and replace media. And then there's a whole other set of features, which is a long list. And I know you were looking at the beta, so you know them better than me.
I know, right? I've been playing around with it. I know.
Yeah. So there's just other features to try and make the workflow as efficient as possible for the individual user. So high throughput recording and magnetic tracks and track mats and some audio improvements and a whole bunch of things I'm going to forget. So someone's going to be mad at me that I didn't mention them right now.
Marketing's going to be like, Wendy, you didn't say this feature. No. Okay. Well, and I think, and this is, so what we're talking about here, and I think this is something I've seen over the years, is the role of L&D is changing. And I think that creates some discomfort for people. But I think on the other side, if anything, I think it's elevating our role if we do it well. To this point that you brought up, I think in the past, sometimes we've tried to be the gatekeeper of content. We've tried to be that gatekeeper, which especially in especially in software. I mean, it's this way outside of software, but in software especially, the pace of change is way too fast. It's way too fast to be like, you can't have a job aid unless we create the job aid. You can't have, a video unless we create the video, because you're you'll always be playing catch up. But that doesn't mean our role is not important. And I think it's interesting where Camtasia 2020 has gone, which is you look at the subject matter experts and they don't necessarily have the same skill set we do. And I feel like learning is vastly misunderstood. It's the most misunderstood profession out. Well, I won't say the most, but right. I think a lot of people just think, well, you make training, that's all you do. And I think there is an art and a science behind, how you do this. And that's what it sounds like Camtasia has done, is it said, as an instructional designer, your role isn't necessarily to produce all of the videos, but your role is to architect, using your skill set, what are the important components of video, and pass that out. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, absolutely. How do we encapsulate everything we know about how we want to provide information to the user, and do that consistently and logically, even when you're working across a large numbers of SMEs. But also, like, the other problem is, like, the SMEs aren't always that willing, right, to take that time out and share it. So you need to make it almost like paint by numbers for them. It's not always that the SMEs are clamoring to create this content, but it's needed. And so the instructional designers are playing this role to make that as easy as possible. Okay.
And so with this capability, and I know we're kind of digging into 2020, and we don't need to go too far into it, but with this, it's simplifying it, and I've played around with it a little bit. So you're creating, a lot of what you're doing is creating, right, the stuff that a SME, not only, like you said, because they may not necessarily want to, but they may not have the skill set or the capability to know how to create, right, these transitions or create these animations and things like that. They may know how to put a screen capture of them doing something in, but that may be the extent of their skill set. And by templatizing it, you can say, hey, these are the components we need you to do, but you're the expert, do that. But we're lifting the rest of that for you, correct?
Exactly. And it's not even, they don't have the skill set. It might not be the best use of their time, right? True. Like, you might be this expert in one thing. You just need to share that expertise. You don't necessarily need to worry about how to make it engaging or consistent or findable.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point, right? It's not necessarily that they couldn't do it. It's just when you're going to SMEs, their time, I mean, they're hired by the company to do a specific thing. You don't want your top software engineers spending all their time creating training videos, because that's not what you hired them for. So how did you, I'm curious, so this is a fairly robust new tool set that you're adding into it. What was the genesis of, hey, because again, you said Camtasia and Snagit have been around for a long time, and it continues to just evolve. What was the pain point you saw in the industry that you said, hey, this is where we need to go to keep this product relevant and actually meet the needs? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think if you look at tools in the learning space, learning tech space, like Camtasia is already relatively unique in that it has never targeted professional instructional designers or professional videographers as their key audience, right? They really, from day one, it's always been about democratization, about anyone. The thing we realized in all this, and we have clients with site licenses for Camtasia, and is that we really weren't, we were always thinking about that individual user, like that's sort of how we grew up, and that's what we think about, and that's what we're passionate about. Okay. But we weren't really thinking about the ecosystem of how it's used. And we had one client in particular that was trying to evolve their technical sales staff to use videos with customers, and they were trying to like give all this information about how to do it, but the information didn't show up in the product, right? And that was really the gap, Okay. So what we've done is allow people who are creating those instructions for their deputies and their subject matter experts and the people they're asking to evolve to video, to make all that knowledge and show up in the Camtasia product to make it easier. And we have more to do. I mean, everything's incremental, but we're pretty excited about this release and excited by the reaction we're getting from those customers. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So with this, right, because I do think it's an important, if you look at use cases for this type of stuff, I mean, it's not just software. I mean, I can tell you over the years we've done, and I think video, you hear it all the time. Videos, becoming the big thing. Well, not becoming, it is the big thing. And I think there's a lot of initiatives in companies, not just in L&D, to do more with video, right? To do more with video. But to your point, not everybody's necessarily comfortable with video, or their time is best spent with it. So how do you go through that and actually kind of simplify it for
Yeah.
folks? But there's some challenges that presents, and I'm sure you've seen them. But have you seen organizations that are moving to this model, trying to almost empower the SMEs or guide the SMEs? I can share some perspective on my side, but I'm curious if you've seen. You're very customer centric at TechSmith, so obviously these people come to you for these things. So what kind of hiccups or hurdles have you seen that you've had to mitigate with that?
Most people are grappling with this. Another use case is how do you, we're working with one company that has global support teams in 100 countries, right? And they need to, that's a technology company, and they need to get their SMEs to create content to train support, in all kinds of different translated languages and countries, et cetera. And how do you do that as quickly as possible? And a lot of that, we also, this approach helps with the templatization, the share deputy model. But the other part we're starting to look more and more at is how good are automated language translation for English captions, an easier way to create captions, easier way to edit audio, all that kind of stuff are just little getchas in the process. But there are other organizations too, maybe software companies that have fewer bigger clients that are very controlled and process oriented for what training they provide those clients. And I'm not the CEO of those software companies, so I don't have an opinion if they're doing the right thing or not. But my experience is, was it Mike Tyson or someone said you have a plan till you get hit in the face or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was Tyson. It was something along those lines, right? Yeah, all the plans, and you get punched in the face.
The thing about software training is everyone creates software training the way they idealize the software works.
Okay.
Not always the way people are actually trying to use the software in creative ways, or there are often bugs in software. I know we don't want to talk about that, but sometimes you need training to help people get around a bug or a workaround or an unintended consequence or use case. And I find that these kind of search of excellence, this perfect controlled software training isn't really perfect if you ask the customers, because again, they need what they need. And if you can't turn around that bit of help, as you said, performance support pretty quickly, you're not serving them. So I think there's still more flexibility that's needed in the industry to really look at their customers, and are their customers really getting what they want, not just onboarded them after I sold, but a year later, are they really using the software or the capability to the max and are happy? The other thing we see, we're watching, is sort of the role of marketing, customer education or user experience, customer success, and support. I think it's a shame that some of our clients were seeing quite a significant amount of siloing when it comes to creating content for technology and software, and actually we do it ourselves. We're trying to break down some of those silos. You really don't have time for that. The customer doesn't have time for that. They don't want to look in 4 different places for the same question, and so that needs a lot of improvement in the industry too.
Okay. Well, and I think the thing, there's a couple things you talked about that I think we can kind of dig into or just kind of highlight is, one of the things you talked about on the software side, and I don't think this is just software. So I will just tell you this, and anybody listening, this is a real. I think a lot of times in learning and development, right, we design things around what we idealize reality is, right? You think, and the example you used with software, right, is, oh, well, software should work this way. This is the way people use it. And the immediate visual I had that came to mind is like the sidewalk that goes like this, and the fact that the grass is all dead, going from point A to point B in the triangle, because it's like, we'd like to think this
Yeah.
is how people are using software, when in reality, that is not the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And the reality is people will take the path of least resistance. So why don't we show, and in a perfect world, we design on the path of least resistance, but that doesn't always happen. And I think, like I said, that's not just true for software. I think we do it with leadership skills. I think we do it with, well, this is how you have a conversation with your direct report. And you're like, yeah, maybe, but like the 99 times out of 100 where it actually happens, it doesn't look anything like this nice scripted thing. And I think that's something where, when you look at this, the ability to say, okay, that's where the democratization really comes in, is it's like, if we're really putting ourselves aside and saying, what really is the customer need, right? What is their biggest need? That's where it makes sense. I think the other thing, though, that you have to kind of counterbalance a little bit, and I'm curious if you've seen how customers have done this, is there is that risk of, and I've seen it, right? You get version control issues. You get things where it's like all over the place, and people are operating off the wrong thing, and things like that. So there is kind of this role and opportunity for L&D to help organize or curate or kind of structure that. But I'm curious, how have you seen organizations kind of manage that? Because it can go off the rails. It has the potential to go off the rails. Everybody's creating their own thing, and it may even be wrong. It might be telling people do it this way, and you're like, oh, no, we don't want you doing it that way, because there's a reason we don't. So I'm curious if you've seen it, how people are managing that.
Yeah, I mean, the 2020 way to manage that is through crowdsourcing, right? Yeah. I mean, the best content comes to the top because it has the most usage or the most cross links if you're Google, or the most favorites and YouTube. And I think what works, why the web is still usable in the public, content domain, has lessons for the private content domain that need to be shared, that are much easier than trying to audit every piece of content and deciding if it's useful. I mean, let your consumers, crowdsource, leverage your engineers, leverage your tech support people, to basically upvote or downvote content that is relevant through a variety of means. I can't say I can point to a customer doing that. I'm thinking about it on the fly right now.
Put you on the spot.
I think most customers who've embraced a large amount of content have actually just gone ahead and made that content public. Because what happens? Well, okay, so we're case in point. We have videos on our website. We have a Zendesk knowledge base. We have certification training and a third-party video hosting software. We have a free TechSmith Academy, all available from our website. We have a online community forum, one a very large and active one. And you know where our customers go to get help?
Where?
Google. They go to Google. They type their question into Google.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people are realizing, if you want your content to be, your content needs to be used to have value. Right? Everyone gets that one metric. If you want it to be used, it has to be findable. So where are your users actually going to find content? And there are certainly software companies that are small enough and intimate enough customer bases that isn't as relevant. We have 65 million users worldwide. They're going to Google.
You cannot create enough stuff for every single possible thing that 65 million customers might need help with. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, and what's interesting about it is, and this again goes back to, I think, a little bit of a mindset shift that is needed a little bit, because there is this, I will say, are there certain situations where it's like, right, this is a life or death type thing. We need to make sure people are following a specific procedure a certain
Oh,
way.
sure.
Sure, right. We're not talking about that. Like, hey, let the Wild West go and let people figure it out. You definitely have to do a bit of a risk assessment around, okay, what really is the risk associated with this? But I think, unfortunately, what's happened over time, or maybe it's just been this way, is there is this kind of, well, if let's take that 1% and then let's apply it to everything else. If 1% of things we need to version control and lock down and not let people do anything, why not just do that to everything? And what's interesting on the crowdsourcing piece is there have been a number of things, a number of situations over the years where we've tried to democratize, or we have democratized this stuff, and some of the initial challenges are kind of this gut reaction of, well, what happens if somebody creates something that's wrong? And what I've found over the years is people are better at rooting that stuff out than we ever are.
Yeah.
I mean, it very quickly rises to the surface that, hey, somebody made this, and that's not actually how it works. And it actually feeds back to us to help kind of control it and be able to say, hey, you know what, let's do something about that. I will also say that's like the 5%. It's
Yeah.
not the other 95.
Yeah. I mean, we do, we have a free trial model. So we do a lot of net new user acquisition. So that first getting started training, super important to us,
Right.
highly debated, and needs to be perfect, like for our risk reward needs. And then we have like super power users who are really important for us because they support many of those other 65 million users on the internet and are advocates for us, and they need advanced training. Okay, but those two groups, yeah, 10%. The rest of the people, they're not. They're much less concerned with their actual experience isn't a complaint that they saw something that wasn't quite right. It's that they couldn't find it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I think something that's important for people who may be watching who aren't necessarily as familiar with the whole learning tech stack is some of these challenges that we're talking about aren't necessarily TechSmith challenges, right? Because your tools are for the creating the content. It's not necessarily the distribution management, all this other stuff for, especially like in the corporate space. It's like, well, you make this stuff, but it's some of these other tools then that are managing and doing that. And I think that's where, there is more of a strategy that you have to put behind that, other than just, well, what tools can we get to do that?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So the other thing too, I'm curious, when it comes to, I'm just curious your take and how TechSmith handles this, because so you talked about, right, when new users come on, there's a fair amount to kind of get them up to speed. And that can especially be challenging in the corporate setting where, you now are asking SMEs to create content or say, hey, we need you to build a video or a job aid or things like that. And they haven't maybe used these tools before. How have you supported organizations, or what's your recommendation for people when they're doing this? Because it can be a little terrifying for an L&D org to be like, wait, we're asking a whole bunch of people to start using Camtasia, and maybe they've never made a video in their life.
Well, first, they can take some comfort that that's what we do. Like we probably train, I don't know, millions of brand new video users every few years, and most of people starting to use Camtasia have never created a video before from any product. So that's who we target. That's what we do. And that's sort of part of the philosophy of the product itself. We think about learning curve and, all that kind of stuff. So they can first take some comfort that most people are figuring this out.
That's your target audience, right?
Yeah, they're downloading it, they're learning it. So I don't know that that instructional designer needs to necessarily feel like, oh, I need to train someone how to create video. I think they need to think a lot more about what's important about how what they're creating fits into my strategy, and provide that direction of how you focus that content creation, like if you only want 3-minute videos, so you have, reusability, or, whatever you need to communicate those standards for your organization. And that's something you could do with the Camtasia templates. Like you can show a placeholder and put in notes so people see what the expectations are and how it might fit in. What other recommendations? I think a lot of people who are technical and creating content, or who are subject matter experts, like our educators, they often start by recording a PowerPoint presentation. That's if you are have a certain amount of anxiety to get started, like that can be
a natural starting place.
Yeah, a first task that has that high productivity feel, that I created a video with my voiceover. And by the way, a PowerPoint with a voiceover is so much better than a PowerPoint. Yeah.
True. Yeah, no, that's a fair, right. And I think it's one of those things. And sometimes it's easy to kind of become an L&D snob a little bit, right? Because we know what, like, all these cool things we can do, and we've got all the experience doing some of these things. And so sometimes that's fair. The initial reaction can be like, oh, voiceover, PowerPoint, we can do better than that. But if you've never created a video before, it can be a pretty easy entry point in. And to your point, if the alternative is, here, we're emailing you a PowerPoint, that is significantly worse than a voiceover PowerPoint. So it's a stepping stone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then you get to use a web, and that you can use Snagit for. So it's a little bit easier of step in, and you learn how not to be afraid of your webcam and how your audio works on your machine. And hey, people have made lots of money doing that, and the YouTuber and professional publishing space too.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that, on our end, as we look, because the reality is, in learning and development, our role is changing, and we have to look at the masses. If that's not incorporated into our strategy as part of our content strategy, we're going to be behind, because we need to be able to incorporate some of those things in, and bringing them up to speed. While you may not, have the high end flashy content coming out of the gate, I've seen it personally, right? People who started creating a voiceover PowerPoint, and then they discovered, fade, and then they discovered how they can, do a little animated intro on the front. And you start to see that evolution of, you went from, a rough voiceover PowerPoint to, hey, actually created some pretty interesting stuff over time.
I'll share too. We're all in a certain situation. I got a little distracted because my dog was barking outside my door. I had to text my family to ask them to remove the dog who wanted into the study during this. It's a whole new world of work-life balance, and the biggest thing we're seeing that makes me think about just voiceover in your PowerPoints into a video is this role of asynchronous versus synchronous communication. And we it's been a tough few months. Like, we've talked to hundreds of higher ed suddenly making transitions to remote, and of course their first go-to is streaming, Zoom and WebEx to replace those in-person classrooms, and that makes total sense. But meetings, like live meetings via remote, have the same problems of live meetings in person.
I think they're exponentially worse, because it's like, I feel like when you go virtual live, all the things that you kind of could get away with in
engagement
person just like blow up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But the fundamental engagement problem, I got two college kids home telling me this, is at that particular moment may not be the moment they are ready to consume the content. Yeah. And just mentally, right? Like, you can shame and blame people for not paying attention, but yeah, people have other stuff on their mind, or they might be distracted or tired or whatever. And when you record that presentation and you trust them to view it at a time that they can absorb it, when they're ready and interested and motivated to absorb it, it's better. Like both have pros and cons, but it leaves fewer people behind, right?
Yeah.
If you have that recorded lecture, that recorded PowerPoint presentation, and you can get it out faster. You don't have to wait for people to be available for a meeting, and none of the people are always show up anyway, and those people get left behind, and you still have to figure out how to engage them. So I think there's a pretty big role to stop doing one-way lectures, like presenting a PowerPoint live, and record those and kind of discuss those asynchronously, and test the knowledge of those more asynchronously these days. Yeah, I think that's where things are going.
Well, what's funny is on that topic, while we're moving to this and discovering a lot of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is, I mean, we've been saying this in L&D for a long, right? Sage on the stage, guide on the side, like this, all these like instructional design concepts, L&D concepts have been out there. That's one of the things that's been interesting about this whole crisis is it's almost been like a wrecking ball that's exposed a lot of the things we've maybe known, but haven't been willing to take forward. And it's interesting. Last week, I made this comment and somebody reached out and I had to clarify, was that, I mentioned the fact that from my perspective, live is the actual worst way to deliver content. It's the most inefficient way to do it, because from a content consumption standpoint, all the points you mentioned, it's like not everybody is on the exact same page. Now, where it can work is if you're in a one-on-one tutoring environment,
Sure.
then fine, right? Because you can truly adapt. I'm talking with Wendy, and I can tell Wendy's having a hard time, so we're gonna revisit that concept. Well, now you have two people, your time split. Now you have 5, 10, 15, right? Immediately that becomes a problem where delivering the content is extremely inefficient to do it live. And I think that's where some of these tools, like that you've created, that others have created as part of their strategy, it's like, well, let's democratize content. Let's get it to people where they need it, the way they need it, and they can consume it how and when they need it. Then let's use the live time to do the things that you can't do asynchronously as well, like solve problems, like collaborate, things like that can be a little bit more challenging. So it's an interesting point you bring up, and I would completely agree with it. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that, especially because I know a large part of your market, maybe, or a growing part now, if it wasn't before, is academic settings, correct? I mean, are you seeing that more? Are people starting to adopt this more asynchronous model?
They're starting to adopt it more in asynchronous settings. It'll be, in educational settings. It'll be interesting to see what happens with K through 12. Like my college kids who are studying from home, primarily have Zoom live meetings. But K through 12 in Michigan, we just came back into session, and they had made the decision not to do that, mainly because of the impact of parents, and you need more flexible scheduling, being home with the kids, and everything is asynchronous. And again, not that I would wish that this would continue, and hope that it wouldn't, but you have to wonder, do these organizations need to be more prepared for something like this in the future? And, what do they need to have in place for continuity of learning in an asynchronous setting? So anyone who uses our products is doing them asynchronously because we create video, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's as much part of the strategy now as it'll have to be after something like this, in a couple of years from now.
Well, and what's interesting about it, because I agree with you, right? I mean, this is something that we all need to be preparing for. Not even that it's necessarily, oh, when's the next pandemic coming? Even though people are like, well, there's another one coming, wave 2, wave 3. I mean, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the part that we haven't always taken into consideration is the fact that whether there's a pandemic or not, people do miss out on opportunity for other reasons, which is why we need to think about this, right? I mean, in the academic setting, you have a sick day, you just missed the entire day. There is no, like, when you're sticking to just the true synchronous classroom setting, it's like, well, what happens when you're too sick to show up? Like, you missed out on all of that. And I think that's been something that for me personally has always been a big driver of, it's not that we're trying to kill the classroom or the live stuff because it's bad. It's because it's more limited. It's more limited in terms of who you can reach. And there are people that miss out on things because of that, because they can't be there. So if you can democratize that content and say, hey, regardless of whether you can be there or not, great if you are, but if you're not, you can consume that in a different way. That's just better for everybody. That's not a one way is good or bad, I think.
Plus, that way, if they're sick, they don't come to lecture hall because they can make it up.
Right. Which hopefully after this whole thing, right, this should, I think, I'm hoping that this does open up some of those doors, because before there were a lot of people who would be like, well, you think from working from home or going to training or whatever, it was like, well, I'm going to go even though I don't feel well, because if I don't, I'm going to miss it. And that, we've now seen that's something that we don't want to encourage. So if nothing else, hopefully post all this, that won't be a risk anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So on this, the other piece that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and this has been a fun discussion on this, because there's another product when we're talking about democratizing and kind of accessibility to content that you hinted at before, that's coming from TechSmith to kind of help from an accessibility standpoint, correct?
Yeah, we have a brand new product we're really excited about in the audio space called Audie 8. That's also coming out the 28th when the new major for Camtasia 2020 comes out. And it's really targeted, again, for anyone needs to be able to make video voiceovers, including people who don't know how to edit waveforms, although you can do that too in this tool.
Right.
So it's really meant to make recording and editing your voice as easy as editing text in a document. That's actually what it is. You record your voice, or you import a voiceover recording. It'll convert that to text. You can edit the text, removing duplicate words or ums or ahs or a pause or something you wish you didn't say. Not by working with the waveform, but just by editing the visual text, and then saving that out. And it would help with the accessibility, because you can save that out as a caption SRT file. And include those captions, or you save it out as a WAV file and bring it into Camtasia for your video voiceover or another product.
Okay. So really designed to help from a transcription standpoint, bring this stuff to light. So I'm curious from that standpoint, right? New product in the portfolio. What kind of brought that to light in terms of, hey, you know what, we need to a gap. Again, you're very consumer centric. So something had to be out there that you said, this is a problem that I think with our expertise in our product set, we can solve. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, we have there's one YouTuber who uses Camtasia.
Okay.
That I just coincidentally, some of us follow the channel. And then one day at one of the start of the videos, he said, "This is my 5th attempt at doing my voiceover for this video." Like you just kind of messing up, and then he'd re-record it, from the beginning. Your heart goes out to
him. Yeah, you felt the pain watching it. You're like, we've all been there.
No one talks about it. Everyone does it. So we did, some surveys, and we found out, audio is just a huge pain point. And again, like all of our other products, we're not trying to target the professional musician. We're just trying to target the average person who's trying to share knowledge with a voiceover. I'd like to make that easy, get to that professional sound as easy as possible.
Okay.
So that's what's motivating us. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I think, I've seen a number of folks in our space now that, have So it sounds like, right, it's solving that problem, which I think is huge. It's again, it's a problem nobody wants to talk about. Everybody would like to pretend like, oh yeah, that video I created, first take, perfect. And you're like, no, it didn't. You were umming and on and stopping and hitting pause and re-record 300 times. You just don't want to admit that that's what happened. So I think, I can see it in that sense, really being a problem solver. But I think the other thing that is really growing is, one, with more and more people creating content, there is, from an accessibility standpoint, there is this misunderstanding that like everybody can hear it, right? That if you're creating a video, everybody can hear what's being said. And that's not the case. And from a functionality standpoint, not everybody's always watching content where they can listen to it. I think that's the other thing. So even just pragmatically, you might be watching a video on the subway or, wherever. And I've done it, you're sitting there and you're like, I don't really want to have the volume up. I just want to be able to read what's being said. But then you have other people who truly can't hear it. I mean, they just can't hear it. And I think that is a gap that has been overlooked in the video space for a long time.
Well, obviously, a big part of our business is education, and we have been working on ADA standards as part of our lecture capture solution for a while. So we've had caption editing as part of that. It's very important to us. But I'll also share. I mean, we're a global company. We sell in over 222 countries. We do not have our own software localized to more than a handful of languages. And what tends to be true is people who it's maybe hard for them to follow spoken English to read English.
Language barriers. That's another one.
Yeah, or even my accent, right? I have an accent. If I'm speaking a little fast, it's just a little bit harder, even if someone knows English as a second language, to follow. So part of that accessibility is global accessibility too. Like you want anybody, regardless of their language skills, to be able to follow along as much as possible. So even if it's English only, having those captions is huge.
Yeah. Well, and going back to, another use case for it is going to the globalization of things. Translations can be challenging. And I think being able to get that in text format, even if the audio is not in your native language, being able to translate at least the transcript of it to your language makes it easier to follow along, with what's going on and things. And again, it's all about democratizing content to get the greatest use for the betterment of everybody. So cool. Well, I've got to say, this has honestly been fantastic. I know we've been working to kind of get you on here for a bit, and it worked out that we were able to shift you in the lineup, especially 4 days before some big product releases. So folks that are watching, it's right around the corner, and I can tell you a fair amount of them are very familiar with your products. Having looked over at the comments here and there throughout, there's a lot of people. I make Camtasia videos. I've used this. So you've got some fans. You've got some fans that have been watching. So with that, thanks so much, Wendy. For those of you watching, definitely keep your eyes open for the new Camtasia. And what was the other one? Audie 8?
Audie 8. Mm-hmm.
Audie 8. Okay, so right 4 days from now, people can definitely check those out. So thanks for being here. Thanks everybody, as always, for tuning in. And hopefully we addressed all the great things that you were chatting about along the way. And we will see you next week. Have a good weekend. And thanks again, Wendy.
Thank you.